One. Hello, my friends. It's Bradley J. and the Bradley J. Show. And as promised, today's guest is State Representative Michael Day of the 31st Middlesex District. And we're lucky to have him. He's a very busy guy. And I'm going to give you a brief synopsis of how he happened to be here. And then he's going to flesh that out and give us perhaps 5 things you probably didn't know about the State House, because Representative Day is a student of the history of the State House and a teacher of it as well. And you'll see when, as we tell the story, why and how and why that interests me. So very briefly, through Professor Bob Allison of Suffolk University, a person whom has been a guest, for many times on the program, and I was the host for a while of his Rev 250 podcast, invited me to a procession to reenact the original procession of the moving of a sacred cod, or an effigy of a sacred cod, from the old State House to the new State House. And at that event, I met Representative Day. So this is a good time for you now to talk about that procession, and then we can move into the history of the new, or not quite as old, State House.
Well,
Tell us about that procession.
Yeah, thanks, Bradley. Thanks for having me. It was great to meet you at that procession as well. We ended up walking in a replication of the grand procession in 1798, as you had mentioned, from the old State House, which is down near the State Street tea stop above it. You can actually still visit. It's a terrific museum in there. When the new State House, as they call it now, was built in 1798, they brought up from the old State House legislative chambers the sacred cod, which is a wooden fish about 5 feet long, and sat above the legislature as it deliberated prior to 1798, and continues to do so as we deliberate in the House up to the current day. The cod was a symbol of the enterprise and the economy of Massachusetts and its earliest settlers. The fish was a driver of our economy in Massachusetts, and it sat above the deliberations, as one of the representatives back in the day put it, swimming serenely above the turbulence below it, as debates of the day would occur. And it has been a talisman of good luck for Massachusetts as we move forward throughout history. So we marched it back up, joining you in the procession. We had the fife and drum band and a historically dressed reenactor carry the sacred cod from the old State House back up to what is now our State House, and bring the cod, the replica cod, back up.
And a fish-related historical fact, I hope it's true, the Pilgrims had a lot of problems when they got here. Their problems were exacerbated because they brought fish hooks, but the wrong sized fish hooks. Did you hear that? So they were not able to catch all the fish that they saw swimming around down there. So,
yeah,
wow. Wow.
They didn't know what they were doing, to be honest, right? And the indigenous folks were ones that kind of took pity on them and said, "Hey, we'll help you get through it," and showed them how to fish the waters.
So the procession, we processed to the new State House, and the House chamber was open for folks to visit. And in the well down there, there are a few folks hanging out and chatting, and you were down there. And you shared a few super cool facts about the new State House. And I thought, boy, this will be great. We'll have Representative Day on, and he'll share that with my folks here, folks in Massachusetts. And I asked you to come up with some 5 cool facts. There are probably more, but you've chosen the coolest ones, I bet.
We'll see. Yeah, the State House is it's a fantastic building. It's a living and active museum, a working museum, as we call it. It houses two of the 3 bodies of our government. We've got the executive, the governor, as well as the Senate and the House, the legislature, housed in the State House itself. So it's an active building. It's bursting at the seams with reps and senators. Our offices are here. We're in, obviously, formal sessions and debates and committee hearings. So it's bustling, but it is a museum itself. And so if you get a chance to come up, as you did, Bradley, to kind of soak in some of that history, it really is chilling. I mean, I sit there every day and I wait for them to tap me on the back and say, "Let's go. The gig's up. Time for you to go." Because
it really is
chilling building in a good way.
Any of the figures in history that were around at the time could walk right through the doors still, and it would seem natural.
That's right, and that holds true today. We don't have armed guards at the doors. This is a people's building. You're free to come and go as you are. All of our sessions are open to the public to come in and watch. So it really is continuing the greatest traditions, I think, of Mass. But going back to those historical figures, I'll give you the first bit of facts of the State House, and some may know this. The State House sits on land that was originally owned by a gentleman, a wealthy merchant named Thomas Hancock, who built a grand estate up on Beacon Hill in the 1730s. He and his wife had orchards and just a great expanse of land overlooking the Boston Common. His nephew, who came into his family when his brother John died, was named John Hancock, who, as we all know, was a great patriot, one of the founding fathers, and the first governor of Massachusetts. He served in many different capacities, was wildly popular, was rumored to be a pirate, shipping goods illegally in and out of the colonies, which is how people believe his wealth was really built. And in 1780, he was elected the first governor of Mass. He won re-election every time he ran. He stepped down because of ill health in 1785, and then they clamored for him to come back. He reassumed the office in an election in 1787 and went on to win every year until he died in 1793. The land where his estate was built at the time was on the outskirts of Boston. And by that time of his death, it became what we now know as Beacon Hill, a Tony neighborhood. And his family began selling off lots of his estate, one of which became the State House grounds, sold it to the Commonwealth. His house, incidentally, stayed in its condition until 1863, when his family ultimately sold it to a developer who promptly knocked down the historical house and put up two townhouses. Those stayed until 1917, when they were knocked down by the state. The state acquired the property and built what is now the final look of the State House, the east wing on that side of that. So the house originally is John Hancock's land, the State House itself.
What do you think about the rumors that John Hancock was a pirate? I do understand he was in the whaling business. He wasn't very good at it, as I understand, but he did have, of course, access to ships. What do you think? I mean, but why would he bother to be a pirate, right? Wasn't he rich enough?
Yeah, I think it's got some legs, right? His uncle had a great business down on the docks as a merchant, importing, exporting. And as you know, one of the biggest pieces driving at least Massachusetts' seminal role in the Revolution was the taxation issue with the British. And most of that was driven by our export-import business in the colonies at the time. So I would say he had more than a little bit of a stake in that fight.
All right. Once again, if you just joined us, we are with State Rep Michael S. Day, 31st Middlesex District, and State House historian, probably more than State House historian, but we're talking about State House cool facts today. We've just had one. Let's get another one.
So the one of the biggest features, obviously, of the State House is the Gilded Dome, right? The Golden Dome.
Yeah.
It's the feature. If you look in Massachusetts, all of our municipalities are to have gold on the top of their chief municipal offices. So if you get a city hall, that will be gold topped at some level, and all the way through the Massachusetts State House is really the beacon, right, of that. It was originally made of wood when it was first constructed in 1802, because the wood leaked, as it tends to do. Paul Revere and his company covered it with copper. So it was a copper dome after it was wood, and then it was painted a light yellow up until 1874, when it was covered in gold leaf. Most people think, or many people think, that stayed the way it is in its current shape, but it didn't. In World War II, as we all did, the roof was painted black as a way to guard against air raids that were feared. So you heard the stories. My father and mother used to tell me that the headlights in their cars would be painted black on the top to keep down the shine for feared invasions. So the State House itself, the dome, was painted black until shortly after the war. And then in 1997, 23 karat gold leaf was replaced back up on the Golden Dome, which is why it's legitimately called the Golden Dome. That's
a good one. You mentioned Paul Revere, covering that. And when I hear about these founders, I think the town must have been very small. And these guys must have known each other intimately for a long time.
Yeah.
they'd be, oh, there's that Revere guy putting up that copper. It must have been such a small community, and they must have known each other so well. The good, the bad, and the ugly about each of them must have been something.
Yeah,
Okay.
well, you walked that procession, right? The big hall for the Sacred Cod wasn't that long of a trip, so everything was dense and tight there. You were
Right.
bumping into folks all the time.
Right. Another thing that's interesting to me is how close the water line was to the old State House. It was basically dock front property. Maybe the dock began maybe, I don't know, 150 feet from the door of the old State House, which is much different than it is now. But I interrupt you, and let's go to number 3.
No, not at all, not at all. So we'll go to the top of that dome again, and there's a pine cone that sits atop the State House. If you look up at the very peak of the dome itself, you'll see a kind of a vague-looking structure. That's a pine cone, and that harkens back to the state of Maine, which was part of Massachusetts until 1820, when it became its own state. So we hoisted the pine cone up there as a symbol to the extra state property of Maine, which was part of Massachusetts until 1820.
Imagine that, Massachusetts, if that had not separated, how big Massachusetts would be.
Yeah, yeah.
All right.
The Maine legislators aren't too keen when I remind them that they're our little siblings up there.
Okay, let's get number 4.
There goes New England. Number 4, front doors of the State House. If you look at the State House itself, it's a grand structure, obviously. There are 3 sets of doors when you walk up the front steps. The middle doors are only opened very rarely, and that is when the President of the United States or a foreign head of state visits, and not an ambassador, an actual head of state comes to visit, or when the governor exits the building on his or her last day in office. We just saw that with Governor Baker. It's called the long walk. And the governor exits the executive chamber by himself or herself, walks down to the second floor, through Doric Hall, and then out the main doors, crosses down the steps and into the Boston Common, symbolizing his or her return to the common folk, to becoming a member of Massachusetts again, walking to the Boston Common.
I love that protocol stuff. All right.
Yeah, it's heavy symbolism, and as we talked about during the moving of the cod, symbolism is really important in the United States. It's what we root our traditions in. It's things we look to because we're not a religious state. We're not a monarchy, so we don't place our admiration in religious leaders or kings or queens. We rest our traditions in some symbolism, and obviously the State House is full of it.
Well, the first 4 were great. How about number 5?
So number 5. Oh, and I apologize. One other fact on the doors being opened. That's when a regimental flag of Massachusetts is returned from battle. So every time the troops would come home, they'd bring the flag back, and they would be opened up as a honor, and the flag would be returned. That hasn't happened since the Vietnam War, because flags are now returned to Washington, D.C., as opposed to back to the original states from whence the troops came. So all the flags in the State House still has those regimental flags hanging in it.
Okay, number 5.
Number 5 will be just a modern one. There are still working phone booths in the State House,
yes.
in the House chamber itself. When you walk out of the House chamber into the members area, there are wooden phone booths, stand-up phone booths. They're actually quite attractive phone booths. They've got the doors that when you pull them shut, the light will go on, and they've got working phones in there. Everyone thinks, my children now don't even know what a payphone is. But these are the old school phone booths that you're able to get in and access and use. Back to the days when we didn't have cell phones, and you needed to rely upon those types of instruments to communicate with your staff, your constituents, your family. So they're still working. They're still pretty good to look at, and I use them actually to duck away from conversations I don't want to share with others.
I was wondering what they were for. They are right outside the House chamber, and it seemed to me they might be for the press, when the press needed to, when some news broke, that they would rush to those phone booths and call their newspaper.
So if you look outside the Senate chamber, up on the 4th floor where the public gallery, the press gallery is, you'll see booths there. That was for the public and for the press.
Oh, okay. Maybe I'm getting confused there. And it also looked like people had stuff they kept in there. If you walk by them, there'll be like somebody's glasses and jacket
Yeah,
and some books. Like they've claimed it and staked it. That's my phone booth. Is that what
almost like
that's about?
almost like a high school locker. Everyone's trying to claim their own turf in there, but
Yeah.
we do still maintain hard copies of all phone books and directories in Massachusetts. So if you ever need to get your hands on that, you can't dial 411 anymore. Go ahead and come into the State House. We'll find you that book.
How about John Kennedy and the podium? That's this is
So,
an extra one, but we can squeeze it in. There's two. There's another one after this. I have a question about.
sure. So President Kennedy, President-elect Kennedy, before he went to D.C. to be sworn in and inaugurated as our president, delivered his last public address from the rostrum in the Massachusetts House of Representatives at the State House. His father, the rumor has it, chastised him for giving his best speech before he was inaugurated. So he delivered a great speech. It was recorded, and we've captured a portion of it on the dais itself. So if you come in to visit, you'll see the speech replicated, or at least a portion of that speech replicated, the famous City on a Hill speech that he delivered. Incidentally, when President Kennedy's 100th anniversary of his birth was celebrated a few years ago, the Kennedy Museum came in and played a recording of his speech. So everyone in the chamber sat and listened to it as you would have back when President Kennedy delivered it live.
All right, one other question, and I don't know if it's okay to talk about. I'll just say one word or two words, and you'll say it's okay for me to tell the story or it's not. And that is the clock.
The clock, Tempus Fugit, Tempus Rex, Regnum. I'm getting that wrong. There are two clocks in the State House, in the House of Representatives. One facing the Speaker, who stands up in front, and one facing the reps who sit and look at the dais, the Speaker's dais. There is a heart and a crown over it. The crown saying "Time is King," and I'm sorry, not a heart, wings on the crown that says "Time flies." So time flies. You've got to make use of it in the State House, and it is king. It dictates the rhythms and the rules of the House. One of the traditional rules is when we break, we're in session for 2 years. We get elected in November, we take office in January, and by the Constitution, we have to be in session every 72 hours until we go out. And we go out the second year. So we go straight through Christmas, straight through New Year's, all the holidays, and then we break on July 31st by custom and by rule of the second year. We do that so that we don't have the lame duck session. So you're not passing laws after the elections occur. The tradition, I guess, for lack of a better term, is because it expires at midnight on July 31st. Court officers may sometimes tick that clock back a little bit to make sure we don't hit midnight until the business of the legislature is wrapped up.
I love that.
With the advent of cell phones and wristwatches, it's a little trickier to pull that, so it doesn't occur too much. But
I love that stuff. Before I let you go, share with me, if you will, what seems to be important to your constituents today, these days.
So, yeah, thanks, Bradley. And again, thanks for the opportunity. This is a great podcast. Enjoy it very much. Everything's driving the same considerations, whether it's in Massachusetts or the nation right now, and that's the cost of living, the cost of housing in our Commonwealth, especially. We are one of the most attractive places in the world to live, and so our housing costs reflect that, unfortunately. So that's what we're going to be focusing a lot on in the legislature here. One of the tasks I've been asked to tackle is examining our gun laws, our gun safety framework. And so we'll be conducting a statewide listening tour in the coming weeks and months to hear from everyone, every political spectrum imaginable, every interest group, every individual in the Commonwealth who wants to share their thoughts with us on how we pass our gun safety laws. Massachusetts has the lowest rate in the continental United States of gun-related deaths, and that's largely because we've got a very responsible population and a set of laws that work. But obviously, we can always do better. So that's one of the big pieces we'll be tackling this term.
How will folks be able to let you know their opinions on that? Will there be meetings in different locations around the state?
So we'll be conducting, as we said, a listening tour. So regional meetings throughout Massachusetts. We're starting in Cape Cod next week, I believe, on a topic of the intersection between firearms and suicide and mental health. So each region will have a different topic area, but it really be open to the public to come in and share their thoughts with us on different aspects of what we're looking at. We'll hold a couple hearings in the State House itself, but obviously people are welcome to contact us directly, as you should be doing regularly, with your reps and senators in any event.
Well, I'm going to let you go. You need to get back and start and continue to serve your constituents. So thank you so much for your time. You're wonderful, a wonderful speaker, by the way. I loved your speech at the old State House and when I talked to you at the new State House. So thank you very much, Michael Day, State Representative, 31st Middlesex District. You take care.
Thanks. You as well.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.